A boy possessed, a cult's bloody rampage, and a house so haunted its owners fled after less than 1 month. Today we're covering 3 true tales that inspired 3 iconic horror films. This is one of those episodes where the truth is scarier than fiction. In 1949, a quiet suburban family called their local priest because their teenage son was making sounds that no human should ever be able to make. And when the priest arrived, he swore the boy's bed lifted off the floor. And what happened over the next few months would become the inspiration for one of the most terrifying movies of all time, The Exorcist. The boy's real name has never been publicly confirmed. For privacy, he's always gone by a pseudonym, Roland Doe. Roland was 14 years old, living just outside of Washington, D.C. Pretty normal kid by all accounts. He was shy, didn't have a lot of friends, but very close to his Aunt Harriet. Now, shame on Aunt Harriet because she did something that was going to change the trajectory of Roland's life. She introduced him to something that was gaining popularity in the 1940s, which was the Ouija board. Now, after Harriet passed away, Roland tried to use the Ouija board to contact his deceased aunt. And that is when the activity started. At first, it was small. Scratches on the walls, dripping water that seemingly had no source, and objects moving, furniture scraping across the floor when no one touched it. And at night, Roland's mattress shook.
And I'm not talking regular teenage boy mattress shaking.
This was violent, like something was trying to throw him out of bed. His family was terrified, so they reached out to doctors. Doctors were like, nah, you're good, nothing's wrong. They called the Lutheran ministers, and when they couldn't help, the Catholic priests. They called in the heavy cavalry. That's when things escalated. Leave it to the Catholic Church to escalate, huh? During prayer sessions, witnesses claimed Roland slipped into violent trances. He growled in a voice far deeper than his own, and when priests pressed him with holy water or relics, welts appeared on his chest, spelling out words. One night, according to diaries kept by the clergy, the word hell scratched itself into his skin letter by letter. It's funny, that's what I told my mom about my first tattoo. I swear, it just scratched itself in there by itself. In total, priests performed more than 30 exorcism sessions on this one boy, and each one was a battle. At the height of one ritual, Roland allegedly screamed,
"Satan will never leave me,"
before convulsing so violently that several men had to hold him down. Then, just as suddenly as he went quiet, he opened his eyes, looked around calmly, and told the priests, "It's gone." And according to them, it was. Roland survived. He went on to live a normal life, never speaking publicly about what happened, and his family stayed silent too. Skeptics say this was a case of childhood trauma, grief from losing his aunt, and perhaps even abuse, mixed with the hysteria of very religious people who wanted to see the devil everywhere. But priests who were there until the very end, they swore that they had faced something truly evil. And years later, a student at Georgetown University named William Peter Blatty stumbled across the priest's records. He was fascinated, and so he turned the story into a novel. That novel became the screenplay for The Exorcist. And suddenly, Roland Doe's private nightmare was reborn on screens around the world. The spinning heads, the pea soup vomit, the priest shouting, "The power of Christ compels you!" That wasn't fiction. That was Hollywood's version of a boy in Maryland in 1949. So here's the question. Was Roland possessed by something truly demonic? Or was this the tragic result of grief, mental illness, and religious panic spiraling out of control? Either way, this quiet teenager's suffering created a movie so terrifying that audiences fainted in theaters. And to this day, The Exorcist is remembered not just as a story, but as a warning of what might be waiting on the other side of that Ouija board. August 9th, 1969, Los Angeles. Actress Sharon Tate is 8 months pregnant. Her husband, Roman Polanski, is away in Europe. And honestly, that's the polite way of saying that he was cheating on her on another continent. Imagine being such a piece of shit that while your wife is 8 months pregnant, you're sleeping with other women a continent away. Meanwhile, I felt bad going to the gym when my wife was 8 months pregnant. Anyway, she's hosting a small gathering at her home on Cielo Drive, a house tucked into the Hollywood Hills. And that night, she doesn't know it, but strangers are climbing the fence outside. And by sunrise, the world will never look at Hollywood the same way again. To understand this night, you need to first understand the man behind it, Charles Manson. Manson, another piece of shit in tonight's story, had spent most of his life in and out of prison. But in the late 60s, during the hippie movement, he reinvented himself as a guru. He surrounded himself with a family of disillusioned young people, many of them middle-class kids who cut ties with their old lives to follow him. They lived together on Spawn Ranch outside Los Angeles, and it was a dusty, lawless, run-down spot. To his followers, Manson was a prophet. They believed his every word. And his words, well, they grew darker. He claimed the Beatles were sending him secret messages through their music, particularly one song, Helter Skelter. Like, why couldn't you have picked Yellow Submarine, buddy? To Manson, it was a prophecy of an impending race war, a war that he believed he could spark. And so on August 8th, Manson ordered 4 of his closest followers, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, to drive to Cielo Drive and kill everyone inside. And what followed was pure terror. Jay Sebring, a celebrity hairstylist, was shot and stabbed multiple times. Wojciech Frykowski tried to fight back but was beaten, shot, and stabbed over 50 times. Abigail Folger, heiress to the Folger coffee fortune, managed to run out into the yard, but she was tackled and stabbed 28 times. And Sharon Tate, begging for the life of her unborn child, was stabbed 16 times before she collapsed. After the murders, the killers smeared Sharon's blood across the front door and they scrawled one word: pig. And then, unbelievably, the next night, Manson himself joined in as him and more of his followers broke into another home, that of the supermarket executive Lino LaBianca and his wife Rosemary. Both were tied up, tortured, and murdered in their own house. The killers carved the word war into Lino's stomach and left messages in blood on the walls. The murders sent shockwaves across America. Suddenly, the flower-powered dream of the 1960s curdled into a nightmare. Celebrities hired private security. Ordinary families double-locked their doors, and nobody felt safe. When the killers were caught, the trial became a media circus. Charles Manson carved an X into his forehead. His followers sat in court smiling and singing, completely unrepentant. The world watched, horrified, as Manson explained his vision of Helter Skelter like a deranged prophet. Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi later wrote the book Helter Skelter, which became a bestseller and inspired TV movies. Since then, Hollywood has returned to the murders again and again. From gritty documentaries to Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which dares to imagine a world where Tate lived, which honestly, I preferred. Something about seeing that dude catch a can of Purina delivered at high speed to his face is super satisfying. But the truth, there was no alternate ending, no heroic intervention. Just real evil carried out by young people under the spell of a man who promised them paradise and gave them nothing but blood. And that's why the Tate LaBianca murders are often called the end of the 60s. Because in one weekend, innocence was slaughtered in Hollywood. On the outside, it's just a house. White siding, black shutters, 2 iconic eyebrow windows that almost look like eyes watching you. But for one family, it was a nightmare. because in 1975 they lasted just 28 days before running out, never to return. And what they claimed happened there became the basis for the Amityville Horror. The house sits in Amityville, New York, and by the time the Lutz family bought it, the place already had a dark past. A year earlier, in November 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr., just 23 years old, murdered his entire family inside that house. He shot his parents and 4 siblings while they slept. And to this day, nobody can explain why all 6 victims remained in their beds. No one tried to escape, no one woke up. And that detail alone gave the house a sinister reputation. The Lutzes bought it at a bargain price. George and Kathy thought they were getting a fresh start. They moved in with their 3 kids just before Christmas of 1975. You ever hear the saying, if it's too good to be true, it probably is? Well, buying a house where a mass murder just happened is the equivalent of buying your meat from that sketchy dude in the Walmart parking lot. It's a decision that will come back to haunt you. And almost immediately, things went wrong. Doors ripped off their hinges. Cold spots appeared in rooms that should have been warm. And swarms of flies covered windows in the middle of winter. George became obsessed with the house. He chopped wood constantly, pacing around with an axe, and woke up at exactly 3:15 a.m. every night, the exact same time that DeFeo carried out the murders a year before. You know, nothing says Merry Christmas like Dad chopping wood at 3 a.m. with murder eyes. Kathy reported levitating off of her bed in the middle of the night, and one of the daughters began talking to an imaginary friend, a pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. George claimed he saw the same red eyes staring at him through a window. And then came the most infamous detail of all: green slime oozing down the walls. Within 28 days, the Lutz family had enough. They fled in the middle of the night, leaving their belongings behind. The story exploded in 1977, prompting a book called The Amityville Horror. 2 years later, it became a blockbuster film. But here's where it gets messy. Skeptics believe the Lutzes invented the haunting for money. DeFeo's defense attorney even claimed he and the Lutzes dreamed up the whole story over a bottle of wine. On the other hand, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren insisted the house was infested with demons. Lorraine swore that she felt pure evil there. Whether hoax or haunting, the story became one of the most profitable horror franchises in history, spawning sequels, remakes, and countless spin-offs. And the house? It's still standing. The address was changed to keep tourists away. And families have lived there since. Most say it's perfectly normal. But every so often, another photograph, another rumor reignites the debate. Was it all fake, or was Amityville the most haunted house in America? 3 stories, a boy possessed, a cult's bloody rampage, and a house that swallowed a family whole. Hollywood turned each one into a movie, but long before the lights, cameras, and special effects, real people lived the terror. And maybe that's why these films still haunt us today, because the line between horror fiction and horror fact is thinner than we'd like to believe. And sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that don't end when the credits roll. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Matt, and this is Strange Ordinary. We upload 2 true stories every single week. Please make sure to subscribe, like the video, and drop a comment. Let me know which one of these stories you like the most. And until next time, stay safe.